Good afternoon, evening, and welcome to Open Mic UK. Tonight we have a special guest, Andy from Plantally. Thank you for joining us, Andy. And unfortunately, our co-host Suzi couldn't make it. She had a little incident, enjoying life. And with me from Vermont, Kathy. Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
So, Andy, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a bit about what you're doing in the background. I know you have a couple of things, which is the plantally.com. You have a program running there. Kathy's taking the program also. So what is that all about, and what do you actually do, and what's the core, or what are you trying to achieve with these initiatives?
Okay, all good questions.
Maybe that's a big one, but
yeah. But I'd probably say this: I try and keep things as grounded as possible, because I've tended to witness that certain aspects of spirituality sort of lose people by flying off, and that's one of the reasons why nature's my ally in all of this, I'm going to say. So, I mean, the direct answer to your question is there's very little that me in human form here is doing to direct aspects of this. It's wonderfully choreographed, I would say, and I'm an instrument within that, and I think that's important to to forward state that, because I think not a lot of people, some people can get carried away with character, and I see that happening certainly quite a lot at the moment. And I think it's why with the work that I do, I try and sit out quite a lot as well, and just allow it to do its thing, and it to speak for itself. And it's going to be very difficult to answer this without running away in lots of different directions. But ultimately, let's say, I would say once upon a time, nature and higher degrees beautifully guided our world, and there were some people that were wonderfully sensitive to that acted as mediums and transmitters of that to the world. And at some point that seemed to get lost, and so what I'm doing is essentially quite aligned with that, where I'm going to say that the nature comes to me, but it's also a bit more than that. And it brings something that's so wonderfully aligned to human history in that moment, to planetary alignment, to seasons, and evolution of Earth in general, I would say. And much of this is beyond me in human form. I know very little about the planets and how they move. But as I engage more and more with this work, I see exactly how everything beautifully marries up. So I put myself to a humble servant than a sort of a genius, in all honesty.
Yeah, I've been trying to grasp the big picture of these sessions, and it feels so mysterious to me. But what you just said is so beautiful. Nature in higher degrees. What was the word you used? Orchestrated.
Yeah, or choreographed. It's
choreographed. Yes.
And I think much of life's choreographed, really. If we can fall back into that choreography and theatre rather than resisting it, then I think, yeah, that's going to be challenging, but it's going to move you where you need to be moved, essentially. And so it's all of that. And you've seen for yourself, it's as much as a session is a few fundamental things guiding it, it's anything from nature that's moving in to sort of play their part in that story as well. And I think that's the beauty of it.
It's so beautiful because players move in and out, or I haven't been there long enough. I think this is my 9th session, though it doesn't feel like something that I'm keeping track of that way, because it's more like paying attention to a piece of music, or a poetry book or something. how things jump in and out. Plants, divinities, rocks, right? Creatures for sure. So if you do you want to describe kind of what it is, if in case people are curious? Um,
Sure. Yeah, so we probably have to bring it back a little bit, don't we? And I'd probably start with this. Sorry, let me silence that. Essentially, born, I'm going to say born here, didn't particularly want to be here again. So that was the sort of start of a story. There's this cognitive dissonance that can go on, I find, where I think it probably goes on after each life, where you sort of realize what's gone on. Then you're like, let's go do it again. And then you're like, oh, shit. So there was a degree of cognitive dissonance when I arrived, and I found oneness and comfort, and what's the word? I want to say family in nature. So I was lucky to grow up by the forest and just wanted to spend all my time in the forest, and I felt good there ultimately. And then I found people awkward at times and couldn't quite grasp some of those, degrees of stories that were playing out, and essentially, got brought into them as well. And then it was, so there was a simplicity and the beauty of being in nature. And then, went to school, went to university, did a master's, started doing work, and always could feel there was something else. There was always something else that it shown itself, but I hadn't been physically led in spiritual directions, I'm going to say, at that point. But I was understanding there was something bigger, something more majestic, and at a certain point was eager to do that. And so I started growing and working with psilocybin mushrooms, growing them myself, and taking them very carefully by myself in nature, with great respect and with pure intention. And I was taught incredible amounts. I'd just walk around the land and I would be taught. So I understood from that how to enter into other people, how that worked as an idea, and this and that opened the door. And but I was eager to go a bit deeper, and that's when ayahuasca dropped on my lap, so to speak. And psilocybin was soft, gentle, shoes were off without even being asked, and ego had disappeared before you'd even realized. And ayahuasca was for me, a more brutal experience with very, very strong lessons. But ultimately, it opened up lots of doors after I don't know after things had been chipped away, I'm going to say. And the chipping away is also the clinging on that the ego might have to certain things as well. Like I said, psilocybin was soft and it had gone, and ayahuasca would battle. For me, would battle with the ego and would put it in its place. And I think that's actually a very important lesson. But a moment happened during that when I was in the Amazon, and I think it's important to add in at this point. I was in the Amazon, but I was working with plant spirits. And so the way it worked there was you do an ayahuasca ceremony every 3 days, but you'd be dieting plants that would be specific to both your condition, both your weaknesses, and both, I'm going to say, resonance. And so it wasn't a single ayahuasca thing. It was ayahuasca maneuvering these different things around, and those things becoming very visible, to which one learns that behind all of nature are character forms, a lot of which is, I might say, ancestors as well. So ancestors have moved into nature. And a certain moment came where I'm going to say at that point everything dropped away, and there was only trust. at that point. And I spoke with someone earlier today about that. It was really interesting. Just total trust. It's like, okay. But from that point, a few other things happened, but ultimately I don't want to diminish this, it's probably the pinnacle, but I met, I'm going to say I met with the all through nature. So how nature in her entirety manifests in our world. And at that point I could enter into all of that. You touched earlier on the rock stones and the plants and how they play, but you can't forget the elements. And so more recently you were talking about the flooding there and how that also played its part within the podcast. So it's how all of these elements come and work in together, and how they materialize, manifest in form, of which within us as characters here as well. And so the door opened, but the really interesting part is the door opened, but then it's realizing what's possible then. And that started a long journey of a little bit, can I do that? I can do that. I can do that too. Can I do that? Not yet. And then eventually like, oh, now I can do that. And so it was that, a lot of exploration. And I have some relationships with I'm going to say very high level indigenous that have maintained such strong degrees of purity and connection. And I don't know what my point was, but we speak from the same place. Oh, that's it. I didn't have a mammal, which is, the Colombian spiritual leader sense, where they, as a child, as a baby, they're identified as being sensitive, spiritually sensitive. And then they're guided on a total learning experience where they're up at 4 a.m. being taught by the mamo, and this whole ancestry line and knowledge is being sort of absorbed by them. But mine was mine showcases you don't need someone in human form to remember it all. It's always there. It's always been there. It will always be there. So even if a line's broken, people talk about lineage that's been broken. It's still to be found, is what I would say. And a degree change the names and change some of the stories, but everyone's talking about the same thing as well. And that's what I found quite beautiful, speaking with people who are very far removed from certainly Western civilization, who have gradually moved themselves up mountainsides or gone into totally untrodden lands just to get away from it all. So it's amazing to speak with them from that place. And I think it's also amazing for them to witness that's still possible within this part of the world as well. Because I think to a degree things have become quite divisive between indigenous and Western. And I don't find that fair, because I'm in neither, I'm in both and in neither at the same time. So that's more or less it. So it's I'm going to say access to the purest point of nature, and supporting her, but essentially, and this is the most important thing, because she can throw humanity off her back like that. Nothing, it doesn't affect her. Most importantly, it's about aligning human with nature, and protecting humanity is actually the point behind it, because we're for the most part, as a human species, we're pretty far away from natural laws that govern our experience here. And we know from the human body what happens when one gets too far away from their true nature. It doesn't go so well. So yeah.
I have a question. You mentioned plant medicine.
Yeah.
Which one of them?
Which that I worked with? Oh, which plant spirits?
Yeah.
These are ones that wouldn't be known by our side of the world. But I'm trying to remember now. Well, essentially, when I arrived, I worked with tobacco, and tobacco plays a big part within the culture in which I was within. And it's something I've worked with in sessions as well. It's one of I think it's one of the best medicines in our world, actually. If I was to count on one hand, or to point on one hand, tobacco would for sure sit there. And then you see what's gone on in our world with tobacco and, you know. So I work with tobacco, and I'm trying to remember now. There's a plant called camelonga that I worked with, and I'm going to say, so camelonga links to oleander. Do you know oleander?
Mhm.
It's I don't know how you would describe it. There's a group of plants that are poisonous plants, and you have to be very careful about working with them. But essentially, I learned that um, that is poisonous has
Mhm.
incredible stuff to teach, but you've got to know how to dance together. And so camelonga technically is technically poisonous. It's toxic, certainly in parts. And I was drinking its seeds, that, you know, half male seed, half female seed, that were grated down and boiled in water, and I would drink it. But I was on a dieta, and a dieta means you've stripped away impurities that are going to be toxifying your body. So to be bringing in something that could be considered toxic, your body can manage it because all the other stresses have gone. And that was pretty special for me. And you learn, I think you have camelongarish, or so you have people that specialize in that as a plant as well, who become, you know, that are taught so deeply by that plant. So I definitely pay tribute to that. There's another plant I didn't get to do. It's called Plantally, and I can share the stories told. That you would have this plant, and you would drip from the leaf into your eye, and people were painting masterpieces. So it awoke the artist within, and so, I mean, that this showcases the possibilities in this space, and it's probably a good moment to say, if you take any condition, if you take any character here. So let's take someone that's it links to the last podcast that I did, and essentially within it, she said she wasn't able to grow. She'd still remained like a child, although she was 50. And I know that condition. It's easy to see it in nature. It's easy to see when you get a plant and you put it in the ground and it doesn't grow, especially here in Portugal with like clay, like nutrient deficient soils. And so you see a plant that can't get its roots through the ground, and so it doesn't do anything. It just sits there. And but then look in nature and look who comes to those soils, and like who works them, who breaks them apart, who then the sort of pioneer species. And so within my work, it's, if you've got someone like that, you take a pioneer species and you bring it into them, and it's just going to be like, bam, let's go. You can apply this to anything. Just watch nature, sit and watch the yeah, lovingly, what's the word? Compassionately, compassionate inquiry. I heard the other day. It's like, just watch with loving eyes what's going on in nature, and what it's doing, what its function is, regardless of what humanity's done to that as a species form, which is, pulling it out of lawns because it doesn't look nice, and you want a solid green, lawn or whatever, and watch what it's doing, because it's got a beautiful role, and nature's sort of like, okay, let's move you in, and at the same time, they're moving in because they know their place. They know that the conditions there for them to do what they need to do to, develop soils and return biodiversity, and all of that.
Fascinating with the talk about what do invasives. The first thing you mentioned was oleander, which I know is in the South here. But there were all these flowers when I was in Spain. And, the first day I got out my Google app and what is that? Well, it's oleander. Holy cow, it's highly poisonous and it will kill your horse and it will kill your dogs and your children. And yet it's everywhere there. And so we all read about it, and it's interesting that it's not here everywhere. I mean, climate has something to do with it, but I'm kind of relating that maybe to the safety that I felt among the humans that I was around in Spain, that it was a very different culture, and just the sense that I got, safety really stood out, and family, and maybe that has something to do with, uh, you talked about how you cleansed the pieces of you that were gonna react to the poison, and so that the poison couldn't affect you that way. Um,
Yeah.
so here locally, we have so many invasives, but we're also finding that one of the ones that they've been burning and putting chemicals on and pulling out by hand, and airplanes are poisoning it, is also our cure for Lyme disease,
Mm.
which is so big. Um, so that's also what you're doing with the human personalities during our sessions, repopulating with something that's going to break up the clay soil, or add the nutrient that has been lacking,
Yeah. Yeah.
your entire adult life.
Yeah. The nitrogen fixing plants,
Mhm.
they're special to work with, because if you feel their dynamic, they begin building the soil. So you feel the sort of earth, and then you feel the movement of water come up, and then you feel the heart open, and then you feel the higher centers, and they're wonderful to work with, because yeah, a lot of people weren't nourished as children for various reasons and haven't developed. I mean, look at our world at large, to be honest. And it's a fundamental root cause of so much that's gone on in our world, I think. And if you want to correct root cause, you've got to go there. And there's loads of ways you can go there to address it, but this is my way of doing it. And I was listening to I don't often listen to other people's things. I don't really read any books anymore. I'm just, any moment I have that I've got for myself, I'm exploring all of this, or I'm sitting with plants and trees and learning their things. So, to touch on one last thing, because I think Ramzi's got a question, but with invasive plants, the way that they'll speak is, you will not hold me back. They're just like, I'm going for it. And look at the application of that in our world. They're fearless, they're determined, and they'll make it happen. But they also won't be contained, and so you're into a sort of a boundary level there as well, which is like, you want to break a boundary down, but careful it doesn't, overstep that, which is, at least in Europe, I'd say it's how people used to get on a Ryanair flight. They'd be like pushing everyone out the way because they want to get the best seat and get their bag at the top. So it's a bit, that's the dual side of it. It's like you've broken free from these sort of chains, but then you're trampling over everyone else.
Yeah.
What were you going to ask Ramzi before?
Yeah, I'm going to ask. Well, I can't remember what I wanted to ask originally, but something else came up.
Yeah.
Do you, when you plant those when you enrich the soil to place the plant in them, do you energize the soil yourself?
Physically on the land with the things that I do, or in the session itself?
Well, both.
Okay.
Because I'll just so that we don't go off topic a lot. I've seen indigenous people in Peru where the energy that they not exert, but they insert into the earth as part of the process helps the plant or the medicine plant to actually grow even further, and also contain within the environment that it's in. So it doesn't go like wild, but it's growing in that environment, and they if you want to call it, it's a ceremony that you would do just to help that plant grow in that space.
Yeah, I guess if you're planting a plant, you're sort of inviting it into your home environment, and there's a beneficial relationship being established between the two of you, and within that, you're that's like inviting someone to your house, isn't it? It's like, do you mind taking your shoes off at the door and mi casa su casa, you know, otherwise. And so yeah, just I think it's stating that. And I don't, whilst I can freely speak of certain aspects of this, I won't pretend here that I'm a master at planting in physical form and watching all of that happen, because having 2 young kids, having to do work outside of this doesn't give too much time. So if I'm planting a plant, it's kind of like legging it across the land to sort of dig out one, trying to get enough soil out to sort of loosen it, hoping for the best, getting it in before I'm back. So, you know, maybe in sort of retirement, there'll be more of that. And maybe, yeah, when things calm down, because ultimately the Plantally work takes an enormous amount of time and energy as well. And energy into it zaps my spiritual energy a little bit. Sorry, it zaps my physical energy to feed the spiritual part. So I'm sort of managing that. Then I'm managing the fact that it takes a long time to write the words, and probably now is a good time to mention that. So there's a podcast I have called The Language of Nature, and I do it because it's a podcast where I forward write an experience that people are ultimately going to have during the session itself. So let's say this: I spend 2 weeks writing, then I open up a group, and people are not asked to join a group; they're asked if they're already joining. So they're to feel inside to see if they're in it, which is a really interesting way to approach it. There's no kind of pushing, and there's no like stressing. There's just like, if you're in it, come in, and if you're not, no worries. And some people are at times on the fence as well. But I forward written everything, and
I didn't know that.
you didn't know which part.
That I mean, you referenced that, you know, something else is coming in and I feel the next one, but I didn't know that. I thought you were writing while we were doing it.
No, this is why there's an observer, generally speaking, for each session, to to show that I'm not sort of observing a group and using that to inspire writing, that I've written everything
Yeah.
before in the group. And so when people are talking, I mean, it's happening at the moment in the session we're in. People are pointing at certain things, and those words are already in the podcast.
Mhm.
And so uh, it's sort of premonition a little bit, but it's also understanding energy and how energy manifests, and it's also understanding who's centered around at the moment this work that we're doing, and what's going on, what it's seeking to do as well within it.
Mhm.
And if that makes sense. But yeah, words are written before. It takes a long time to do that, because I have to move into a sort of channel space where I'm in the flow, and I'm writing, and I'm laughing sometimes when I'm writing. I don't know how. So Ramzi, you're a medium, and I don't know too much about the way that you do your things, but I find it brilliant. I find it, because mine's all rhyming as well. So I'll be searching for a word that goes in, but that will complete the story as well. Almost like the sort of whole language has been written for this moment. So I'll be laughing. I'll be like, okay. And also the genius of it also, how clever some of the things are within it. But so that takes a long time to do, and a long time of going back over it. And the nature of my work as well is degrees of divination as well. So if I've written something that's not fully on, I need to go back and alter that sentence a little bit, so it's got a more of a flow to it that's in line with it, and that I haven't gone off piste a little bit. And if so, I bring it back to it, and also kind of owning what that thing is and how it. So if we're working with fire, there's a bit of punch to what I'm writing, and it's a bit like, that's enough now. There's no more of that's going to go on, and so I laugh when doing that. So the difficult for me is bouncing between human form in this world and all is one, and then the space in the middle, this spiritual space that's playing, and it's allowed its own flavor. And ultimately, my own belief is that I don't think after here, well, unless you've done it all, you fall back into still another place of separation. You fall back into your origins, of which there's different origins. That's my understanding, and how those origins have their own way as well, and how they're a bit separated from other things, but how ultimately behind that is, yeah, everything with zero hierarchy and together. So that's my take, at least at this moment in time, anyway.
It's even hard for me because I'm used to your voice in your poetry. Your poetry is unbelievable,
That's sweet.
and I think that the poetry is what pulled me in. How everything, the whole story, is tied together in one of your pieces. I was lucky enough to be observer one time, and I think for that session. So I'm just going to say kind of what we do when you
Yeah.
decide that you're in it and you join. Then we're in an online group where we share when we feel called to share. Some people share all the time. I haven't shared yet this session. I'm just getting my feet. So we share, and then Andy is sort of, like, uh, you know, getting this river in shape, and maybe giving gentle nudges here and there, encouraging people, helping people. It's not always easy, right? It really brings up some powerful healing, which is not always fun. And then as we go through the session, for me, I at first, the first couple sessions, I was, really trying to figure out what's the divinity, what is the plant, and what's the element, and where's my body? Can I feel the wind? Is it more like water? Okay, I'm a water lily because there's mud and there's like a little bit of flow. And so as you're starting to figure that out, how it relates back to your personal life, what's going on with people around you, um, and then we have a session where we all listen to music, the same music at the same time, which I think is really powerful. And then we share based on what we see during that. I would call it a journey. And then we get to hear this piece of poetry put with music. And so after you've been quiet for so it's like about an hour and 10 minutes, then Andy's voice comes on, and we hear the podcast. And then you can really, like, oh, okay, like the big teeth that I felt were orangutan. And it fills in the blanks a little bit.
It's
That
Yeah, it's probably a good moment because I haven't said this yet, but so part of this is, number one, I don't share who it is we're working with, so people have to entirely feel it. And part of that is it just in one way, it moves the mind into more of an observer. It can't control it. In fact, if anything, the mind realizes I have actually no control. It's been backseat driving the whole time, and I think that's a vital lesson that humanity needs to learn, because I'll come back to this. There's a really cool part with this that touched on my other work. But so everyone has to feel it. They've sort of become it, and it's moving into their dream world, and it's pointing things in the day a little bit, but ultimately, maybe I'm not sure if it was you that shared this, Kathy. It's making you more more tuned to everything that's going on. Yeah, it was
That's
you that
right.
mentioned. You said, I know when there's a new plant growing outside my front door because I know my land. So it's strengthening that. It's moving. You're not going to get it if you're in this sort of circling thoughts in your head. You're going to get it when you're present ultimately, and you're taking in, and the feedback form within you that is able. And this was in the podcast that Lucy shared on. Knowing what to share and what not to share. So knowing that life's just going on, but knowing when there's a moment in life where something's going on that's fundamental. And for me, it's often the animals coming, and in very specific ways, and things are going on with animals. That's one big part, and how they both are confirming and guiding, but also how they're bringing supporting medicine in as well. So I'm going to say, so at the moment, the dove bird is very, very, very prominent, strongly so. And I watch how it drops its feathers. And I know the medicine of the dove. I know what it stands for, but I watch where it drops its feathers on the land. And I understand that's medicine for the land in that point. It's doing that. And that as a human species, we've run and we've like gathered all this stuff up. Well, I want it. I want it. It's like sometimes it's for you, and sometimes it's nothing to do with you. It's like on the land to let it be, and that's how nature can conduct itself. If everything's medicine, in this, at least from the way I view this world, all of these things are happening. The jay that's dropping the acorn is perfectly placed because there's meant to be an oak tree there. But when human tries to mimic it, that for the most part, they're not aligned with all of that. So they're like, I'm going to plant an acorn every meter squared, and we're going to build a big forest. And it's like, it's not meant to be that way. The land was never meant to be like that. And right now, everyone's clapping, like, oh, look at this. It was barren before, now it's all these trees. And it's like, yeah, but you've planted umbrella pine trees everywhere. They're like, come on, guys. And so something that I'm working on at the moment is ultimately this bridge point between humanity aligned with divinity and nature. This intuitive, innate way of being alive here. And everything that we're doing, like the dove dropping its feather, and that's us. Every footstep we're taking, it's doing something. Every whistle and tune we do is doing something beautiful, and trying to bring things more back to that, because we're, as a collective human species, far away from that, particularly at this very moment in time. And yet there seems to be some positive things developing, and even that's been hijacked in some degrees because it's theatrical plays that rather than truly aligned, felt. It's how can I make money from it often? And that's a driving force. Or how can I get myself known in the world? And those things don't drive me at all with any of this work. And so when you asked, I think before this, Kathy, like, is an aim for you to try and build this? It's like, I have no ambition really. Sometimes I want to retire, as you know, because it's hard work. And but every single time I want to retire, something magical happens, and I'm too curious. It's so funny. So when a session's coming to its end, often just before we do this main session, the main session's essentially me, for the first time, very consciously moving into every single person to move a more concentrated form of the medicine into them. Around that time, I already know who's next. So there's a sort of handing of a baton, and the next one's running, and it's left its signature even within that, that session that's related to another thing. And so I'm not directing it. It's like, okay, now we're moving. Okay, now this is coming in. And sometimes I'm like, oh man, it's been back to back for 3 years now, and energy is continuously changing. It's like one moment, I'm in sort of chilled out, watery, and the next I'm like, let's, and so in one way it could be considered a bit bipolar. It's like state state switching, and also what that energetic does to trigger people around, you know, how they're comforted when someone's peaceful and really chilled, they can be comforted and feel good there. But when you're a bit more assertive, it triggers them. And so I have that sort of playing out in my world. But the last time I sort of wanted to retire, and I was like, the spirit in question, in this case, the divinity in question came, and it was like a little bit like, come on, come on. And it wasn't revealing itself in full. It was a bit of a teaser, like a little sort of veil stroke curtain, a little bit like, come on, aren't you curious? And at a certain point, I was like, come on, who? And then it just starts, and then it's all the next sessions begun, and yeah, we're back in it, and I'm learning these new aspects and degrees of elements, because I'd like to say that part of this is being able to weather it all, and how certainly with the sort of urbanization of humanity, and also with the way we grow food now. Think about the giant greenhouses where we grow the blueberries, and that's not a blueberry that's out there, it's something else. And people think about Dubai, actually, when they jump from air-conditioned houses into air-conditioned car and move to air-conditioned mall, and it's breaking out of that into all of this, pouring with rain, blizzards, winds, and scorching sun, and being able to find comfort in every single one of those environments, going slow and putting a hat on and sipping water in the hot sun, and how the same applies in our body ultimately as the seasons change, and how our bodies react, and how a world that's meant to be globally warming but also might become ice age. It's sort of like, how are people going to be in that as an environment? Can they manage their temperature in sort of Wim Hof style in very cold environments, and how are they in hot environments, and apply it to everything. So it's within this is degrees of human conditioning as well, and environments you weren't happy and couldn't hack before, now managing to make peace and coexist in them. They might not be ones you choose, but you can manage them now.
Well, I experienced that when I was doing your session while I went to Spain. And I've lived in different climates. I grew up in the cold. I lived in the south of the United States. I was fine there. Now I'm in Vermont. It's cold here. And the thought of being in Spain, I thought, oh, I'm not going to make it. And it was because of the idea that I was able to step back and just say, yeah, I'm in Spain now. And I'm listen to the medicine there, and part of the medicine there is the heat and the dry and the olives and the oleander. So what you're doing, it's working for me. My I'm I'm a different person than I was in December before I started this. And I'm watching the medicine slip into the people around me, which I think this is the third session where that has become evident to me. And that I think is just wild.
It's cool. It's cool, huh? And this goes
It's
back to
so cool.
this is what I said at the beginning, where there were people that would sort of carry those codes across humanity. They would sort of broadcast them. The last podcast had a quote about lighthouses. I can't remember the exact quote now.
Oh, I love that. The lighthouse doesn't run around shining its light,
chasing boats or something. It just
right.
And so, and a point of that falls back to that that both by becoming more authentic people, versions of ourselves. I don't want to try and use like cheesy buzzwords that are just thrown in everywhere now, but essentially, I would say becoming true human, which is our innate capacity and capability here. Anyone that's around you, it's contagious, but in a in a benevolent and positive way. It magnetizes the same thing within them, and there's probably more articulate ways of putting that. At the same time, as you'll probably know, that process can sometimes be a bit hardcore, because in moving someone into an authentic version of themselves, there's a lot that needs to fall away. And so the nature of this work can be quite, this world as well, actually, but it can be quite confrontational. And there's not many people that have both the trust, faith, and resilience to be able to do. It's like I can only move to 30% of what I'm really truly meant to be, and that's also okay. And they've moved, that's wonderful. And other people just have just such a desire and will to go all the way back to see, oh my God, if this is it now, how's it going to be in a year from now? And yeah, and I think that's it. It's like, wow, a human state that's forgotten for the most. I mean, we hear some magical stories. So there's some magical stories that come from the Himalayas, and there's some magical stories that can come out from some indigenous in Amazon and other things as well. And they're closer to full, capacity and relinquishing all these layers of conditioning than much of others. They've been holding that as well for the world, huh? Which is why they remove themselves from the world, just to try and. So we spoke about the sort of toxicity and removing. So that's what they've done ultimately. They've in the quest to remain pure, they've just removed themselves from toxic environments, just to hold it. And I'm not saying that's what we should all do, because that's not what life really wants either. It wants us to be together, but sometimes it's called for. Huh?
I wouldn't mention this, but people can find it on your website. Our last sharing had to do with addiction, and so these are humans that are just like me. I'm in my little place in Vermont, in the woods, thank goodness, processing all of this that I can grasp, or that's like so ethereal, or that's so obvious, and then and then it's literally working in us, and people are healing and becoming more happy. It's incredible to watch.
It's cool. It's life as it should be. It's almost, I feel, it's not about promoting something, which life's done in marketing,
Yeah.
this, it's actually just returning to how you're meant to be.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you have to be blissed out either. That means
Right.
you're moving with life, and life's going to challenge some stuff, and it's going to bring good days, and it's going to bring bad days as well. But you're going to keep your cool, and you're going to move through the challenges, and you're going to laugh at situations that are reoccurring, that are problematic, because it's funny, and there's still a bit more stuff to learn and to do and to implement and then integrate. And but so yeah, I'm not one to sort of talk about the accolades of the medicine, but if I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't find it extremely special. And I also made an agreement with life, which is to commit myself to something that changed me into a better person. And that's what I've stood by since certainly 2015, when I've very actively done this. And I think a lot of people will look at how and why, and but I think a lot comes here to blind faith sometimes.
Oh yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and it's not to be proved. It doesn't want to prove itself. That's not the point of it. The point is to to blindly trust it and to see that where it's bringing you. So yeah, it's really special medicine. It's not for everyone at all, and I don't promote it because I don't want to bring in people that shouldn't necessarily be in this space either. It's got to be, like you said. I've not got an eye on time, so I don't know if I'm sort of waffling on. There's going to be this,
We
but
have 9 minutes.
okay. So I got a phone call last week from someone I know, and she's a Colombian lady, and I sent her the podcast that had Arawiku from the Ahuaco tribe in Colombia speaking on it, and she phoned me crying, and she said, I listened to it 2 weeks ago, and it's done stuff. And I think the other important thing to say is how much time that goes in, and the poetry that goes into the podcast. It's medicine. It's medicinal. And I've watched what happens when people listen to that. And her words were really beautiful, actually. She said, I didn't listen to it. I listened. There's a distance as well. So I'd always encourage people, like, just lie down in the dark and just put it on and just feel it. Feel what's happening, because there's a lot moving through, and I don't even want to own it. I'm, like I said, a sort of instrument for it, and yeah, it takes a lot of human energy and time, but I'm trying to honor that essentially. But it's medicine, and yes, it's going to move people, and then it's going to move the people around the people, and it's going to move the people around those people. And if we look to the world and, oh my God, what are we going to do? Look at this. It's that with all these authentic modality forms that are speaking of the same thing, I think, dancing within the same space, that are delivering that positive polarity of humanity.
Yeah, that's what I do. Is I go back and listen to it before I go to sleep, and it's so interesting. What with the share, your part is around what, like less than 20 minutes,
Mhm.
and some nights I hear all about the plant, and then some nights it's all about the creature or the element. It definitely shifts and becomes an ally as time goes by. You've mentioned, I don't a bunch of times in our group that you're going to take a break. You were going to take a break around your birthday, and I'm always like, no, don't do it. And I think now that if you said I'm taking a break, because you might, because we're doing part 2 of
Yeah.
a 2-parter, so I'm like, oh my God, is it gonna stop? I'm just gonna like fall off the cliff. Um, I think I would pay more attention to what's around me.
Yeah.
I would
But
be okay, I think.
the the question is, because I could take a perspective on what you shared as dependency as well. I'm not saying that's what you're saying.
I know.
That's not something I would want to. I mean, wonderful if one was trying to make a business from this. Well,
You're
I'm
not
sure
gonna make a business.
a lot of people have done that in the world as well. But part of it, I might say, is I don't know. I'm going to say it's riding a bike with the training wheels, and but you've sort of taken them off, and the person's still riding, but they didn't realize it.
Yeah.
So I'd like to say there's a part to this which is like, you're already in it now. You're like,
Mhm.
you're there. You're in the heartbeat of Earth. You're there. And so I don't want reliance or dependency. I want that, actually. I want that, and for people to move out however they do from that in their authentic ways, following in a similar path of respecting and honoring how that's come to be a little bit as well. So I can't answer that to everyone. I know that some people have enough because it's
Mhm.
um, the back-to-back nature is, they realize it's doing positive things. They realize how they're moving, but they also know where their limits are.
Mhm.
Like, And but I can't speak for when people drop out and just see if they remain in it. I think there's a part of me that's so deeply in it. It would never change. It's by my nature and my character behind character as well that I'm so in that, and so I can't sort of speak for other people. I can see that they'll be developing, moving closer and closer to that point. You could put percentages on it. Some people do. It's like, you're 40% there, you're 50% there, and like, so I can't answer that. All I can, yeah, and I don't see it stopping. Sometimes it'd be nice to take a break. I do think that it's important to shift a little bit within it, but I think that's also happening now as well. And I've been quite careful. Divinity plays a large role in this, and yet on one level, that's not so approachable for many people. Talking about an animal or a plant is quite approachable for people because they see it. But divinity, they can't quite fathom, or there's a lot of hocus pocus stuff going on within that space. So I try to move into a more physical world manifesting form of divinity, and talk from that angle and perspective. But ultimately, it's the divinity that's doing its thing. That's how I see it anyway.
We agree with you.
Yeah.
Listen, our Spirit Cafe, we never set it up in a way where it's a business. We never went out and marketed it to death and on social medias and all of that. It just happened. And when it happened, the right people come in, they get what they want, they walk out. Some other people come in, they get what they want, and then the ones who left it go, oh, why did I leave? I need to go next time. And then they show up the next time. So I fully understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's funny.
It's not foreign to us, but it could be foreign to others from the outside. And I do find that I call it life, if you want to call it. Life has a path, and that path is there. Just don't mess around with it. Just walk on it.
Yeah,
and when you walk on it, everything just falls into place and fix yourself. Like you would come into my life today so that I can see what you're doing, and I would walk into somebody else's life tomorrow and they will get something from me, and then we continue spreading that awareness across the board. I just love it. I don't argue anymore. I used to argue with life, but now it's kind of useless in a way.
It is. Honestly, it's akin to backseat driving, isn't it? It's like, all right, we're going there, okay. And either you can struggle with it or you can sort of embrace it. That's your choice. But how does this? I'm nowhere into the last minutes. How does this sound to you, Ramzi? When you look at this, it's very difficult to explain it. It's very easy to experience it. But how does it sound to you? It's familiar, like you get it instinctively, or?
Actually, I had a chat with Kathy way before, and I kind of saw the whole thing happening. And now you gave me a bit more details based on the vision that I saw, and it makes absolute sense. Is that there is a force that creates through something, and that creation sits there, and then you bring it into the session. You don't bring it into the session. It actually brings itself into the session, and everybody who's magnetized towards it just comes over. And something honestly, okay, every time I say spiritual word or I use the word spirit, people sometimes don't like it, but it's on that level of consciousness, things kind of circulate and heals certain parts that we are looking for to heal at that point in time. We don't like miraculously become saints the next morning, but there are parts within us that needed that work to be done in order for us to be able to move forward to the next step, where the next session comes in and just works its magic right at the right spot.
Sure, I think so. And then looking back, it's very difficult to see how you've moved. But with you, Kathy, you're like, oh, since December, yeah, because you've had that run with it. Now you can look back and be like, wow. But I
Wow.
think there's this instant gratification that can come sometimes where people,
Yeah.
I've had this question sometimes, is it's like, what happens now? It's like life.
Yeah.
You know, life. But
Well, that's the fun of it too, the mixing it in.
yeah,
It's not just like, here's this one thing there and this is different over here. No, they're all like,
yeah.
use one and the other and then see where you can get.
Yeah, and people don't like the other part, which is, you said, life. I want to stay over here, and I can't stay over here, but I have to face that. But I guess the way you come in is just guiding to the next, I don't want to say session, but the next healing session. That's what it is at the end of the day, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, my personal take at the moment is Earth's going to change quite quickly, I think. And if people are really rigid in comfort zones and they're not moving with it, they start to get so far away from where it is moving to. One has to look at continued kind of existence here. It's like that you're not there anymore. And so that's what I see. Either, as much as people are clinging to their sort of safety vest a little bit, it's like, no, that's got to go. That's got to go, and you've got to jump in a little bit now.
And that's the beauty of the way these sessions are, is it's not like, oh, I'm going to do this weekend retreat, or I go to this class in this 2 hours, and oh, it's so different out here. It's just, the messages in Telegram are popping up any time of the day or night, and it's just really woven into what's happening with my son, what's happening with my husband, what's happening with work. It's really magical and incredibly joyful. It just makes me so happy.
Cool. And self-realization, I think, is the important thing as well. You've not got someone diagnosing you, telling you, you're realizing it all. And
You
that's
won't say a thing. That's the
exactly. That's self-preservation.
well, I think sometimes I mean, people want to know, like, give me some feedback. What, am I
Yeah,
crazy?
yeah,
And no, it's not like that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Or
On that
Ramzi, I dominated because this was so special to me to um, have a conversation with Andy.
I get
Thank
that.
you.
I get that. It's a joint session anyway. There's no domination from anybody's end. And I know we passed the hour. And
no,
Andy, I would like to thank you so much for joining us today. Your website is right over here. How do you pronounce that? That
I think
plant ally or
it's
plantally?
going to be a plant ally, but I put it together as Plantally, just,
Plantly. Okay. So you can find more information on plantly.com. And we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today on Instagram and YouTube. Thank you so much. And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Have a great evening, everyone. And Andy, thanks a lot again.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me. Thanks for listening.